This year I was a supervisor in the Zendo. So that involved kind of taking care of the space, making sure that the shift lead was well resourced, and kind of being a go-between between the Zendo, other departments, and also the higher up coordinator. I think one of my highlights this year from working in the Zendo was seeing the team kind of coalesce on their shifts. My shifts were a little bit later in the week, and so it wasn't everybody's first shift. And just to see everyone show up, you know, the greeter, the log keeper, the medical triage, the sitters, kind of like just show up excited to play their role. And so it became this kind of well-oiled machine where people were able to kind of receive people kind of in a smoother way. And you could just tell like there was a lot of pride in it, and there was a lot of pride in just being part of the project. You don't see that in a lot of volunteer communities, I feel like, where it really just, it starts to click. People are really floored by the services, I think, if they've never heard of Zendo before. Like, there's something really intuitive about it. They're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, we need that, not just at Burning Man and festivals, but we need that everywhere. So I think a lot of people leave really inspired. A lot of our guests become volunteers. And I don't know, that's what I like to see. I think it's really important that we serve people going through a whole variety of challenges. It doesn't have to involve psychedelics. It can involve just being at a festival, having a hard time, having relational challenges, and kind of transition challenges, grief challenges as well. So it's really great training and experience for people to just be able to be with each other. I think that's something that we've forgotten, kind of in a more like individualistic society. We forget how to be with each other. So I think that's something that people really appreciate in the experience, even if it can be kind of scary jumping into it for the first time or seeing new situations for the first time. You realize there is something really powerful about just being present and showing up, and also being able to ask for help from your team. Because at this point, I've seen a lot of kind of different challenges in the Zendo, and thus far it's nothing that our team hasn't really been able to handle. A lot of people are coming to the burn for the first time. It could be second, third, fourth, fifth, and they're not sure how their burn is gonna go. So it's not always predictable that we're gonna be able to like show up consistently in the same way throughout what can be a really challenging week, you know, weather-wise, relationally, as you said. And so being able to resource ourselves properly in that environment is a big challenge. And to be able to just be honest with each other around what we're able to provide, and make sure that we have enough backup. Five years, I believe. Wow. Yeah, that's a big one. I started doing Zendo before going to school for a doctorate degree in psychology. And I was inspired by my supervisors and shift leads that were really active in psychedelic research and therapy. And even as I've gotten my degree, I keep coming back to the peer model and the community model of care, because it's so needed. Like, we can't just have these like hierarchies of professional care. A lot of people have been let down by that system. And so I think just the people need to be trained to support each other. And that's something that Zendo is doing, even if it starts at these kind of little incubators, these little festivals and gatherings. It's spreading out there, and it's really great to see. I'm just really proud of everyone involved. You know, the leadership and having the vision they're having now to really expand and grow the community. So it's really exciting to be a part of right now. is not necessarily bad. That's a really big one. Because I think we do a lot to run away from discomfort, and to be able to not necessarily lean into it, but sort of accept it as a process and something that you're going through. That's a big lesson that I've had to learn in my life, and just to see it as like one of 4 principles that people are picking up the whole, card and really contemplating on with their kind of psychedelic journey as well, and just life journey. I think that's a big one for me, because if we can kind of think about what's the lesson from this, what are my growing edges, and how can I take care of myself better through that? That's my favorite.
So this year with Zendo, the role that I took on was the role of a Pulse coordinator. Pulse is a kind of an experimental harm reduction initiative that we've been implementing. We piloted at the 2023 burn, and we've evolved it this year. And the intention is to create nets of support for the volunteer and community at large, so that volunteers can receive support after they've sat in potentially challenging sits with other attendees. As a Pulse coordinator, my role was to kind of create the infrastructure needed to train our Pulse volunteers who were stationed at the 2 Zendos. And these Pulse volunteers would be available at Pulse lounges that we helped put up during build. And volunteers, either during shift or off shift, could go to these Pulse lounges and receive one-on-one peer support from these Pulse volunteers. Additionally, we had a structure at the Zendo Pod Camp called the Hearth, and this was a place where campers or Zendo Project volunteers could come and receive, again, one-on-one peer support, resourcing in any way, or body work, kind of providing support outside the realms of just simple one-on-one peer support for our volunteer and community. This year, I helped to set up Pulse lounges at both Zendos and the Hearth at the camp. It was beautiful. I think that it's a grueling process. You're there, and kind of setting up the infrastructure there's a beauty to it, because you're putting your heart into what is to be this really important work that's happening, whether it's providing support to attendees of Burning Man or the volunteers who are providing support to the attendees. And there's this part where it feels like you're not really doing work. It feels like you're just following your heart. But it's exhausting nonetheless. But there's just a quality to it where I just feel joy doing it. I would say my highlight with Zendo this year was seeing Pulse evolve into what we've been imagining it to be for the past year and more. Last year, we weren't able to implement the structure where there were Pulse lounges at the Zendos and volunteers stationed there to provide support kind of immediately after, or kind of in real time as volunteers may need it, and to see that come to life. And another aspect to Pulse, I feel, is I'd love to see that integrated into the DNA of peer support organizations, where we're kind of thinking on the level of always checking in with our fellow volunteers and community and seeing how we're doing and tending to each other. And that's what I see as like the essence of Pulse. And to see that kind of come to life, and people naturally lean into that, resource themselves, but then step in to check in with their community members and just hear about their experiences and connect, I saw a poignant difference in the way that the community was connecting and feeling resourced as the burn went along. Yeah, I think the main challenge that I faced as a Zendo volunteer is the fact that, I had a full-time job. I did get laid off right before the burn, but at the same time, I was putting in lots of work to set up, the training manuals and kind of standard operating procedures and trainings themselves with the Pulse volunteers. And it was a lot of time and effort, which was a labor of love. I was fully in it, and I was there for it. And at the same time, took a toll on me. At the end of the day, I have no regrets as to how it went down. I would have still given the same no matter what. But I think the time put in and the financial aspect of not having a compensation for that was challenging for me. Although I'm not going anywhere, I'm still here to do this work with Zendo. But that was probably the main challenge. Aside from that, it's Burning Man. Burning Man is hard, but that's what I love about Burning Man. For sure, I think that Zendo is part of my Zendo peer support, um, harm reduction, psychedelic service is part of my life now, and there's no going back. So I'll be here. Being a part of the Zendo Project community has changed my life completely. I think that 3 years ago, I had a desire to get involved with volunteering with Zendo and didn't really know how that would come about. And through this kind of magical series of events, I got connected with the community and kind of stumbled into volunteering for the organization and I've met my family through Zendo. So it's impacted every aspect of it. I've come into myself more. I feel like I've come home. I feel like I've met my people, and there's so much work to be done. We're still carrying in the trauma of our ancestors and the people that came before us, but it feels like this is a community where that work to rework that trauma and turn it into potentially a positive change for the world is willing to come through, and people are willing to look at that in the eye, and I feel so grateful. I think the main last thing I'd share about my experience with Zendo is every time I go back and be with the community, I'm reminded of why I'm on this path of peer support or service. And when I see other people join and start volunteering and them reflect the same thing and express how much their life has changed of being in service and supporting others and seeing others discover themselves, it's the most inspiring thing, and I feel excited about the change that can happen through this work. I think the interesting thing about Burning Man is that there is a long-running culture of support in terms of psychedelic or psychological crisis, just naturally been built into the culture. In terms of the support specifically that Zendo provides at Burning Man, I think it creates this infrastructure that allows for this easy flow of people into these spaces to receive the support or care that they may need. Which may be a little bit more difficult to find with decentralized sanctuary care models that have already existed at Burning Man. So through these very well known and supported infrastructures that exist at Burning Man, I think that there's just a higher likelihood that people are able to find the support that they need and potentially walk to the other side of their challenging experience. Rather than perhaps remain stuck in it.
I was one of the co-leads for the build, yeah, and was also there for the strike as well at the end. Oh my gosh! Well, we have our actual camp itself where we all sleep, and then we have our 2 Zendo sites. In past years, we've broken up into 2 different build teams and had one go to the 3 o'clock site and one go to the 9 o'clock site. But this year, for the most part, we stuck together, which was great since the structures are the same. So we had one crew that we all went on to one site and built the first one, and it kind of helped everyone get an understanding of how to build it, what the process is, and then made the second one pretty easy to put up together, minus the wind and of course the weather that came in and kind of delayed a couple things here and there. But for the most part, it went really smooth. would say at site building, it was probably at least around a dozen people, often, like kind of a little give or take a little bit more, depending on what was needed at that time. Sometimes we just need all hands on deck for a part of the build that just requires more people, and then there's other times when less people is better. Yeah, when we put up the big Pacific Yurt structure and put the roof on and put the walls on and these huge tarps, like it just requires a lot of hands and just making sure we're keeping people safe as well, because we're on scaffolding and ladders and things. So yeah. It's always for me just being in camp, getting to know people from Zendo that I'm already friends with, and just kind of deepening those connections, and also the new faces that show up each year, and having the opportunity just to drop in with one another. There's so many different folks that are doing work in psychedelic care in different capacities, or not too, and just interesting folks that Zendo attracts. And so I always just enjoy the opportunity to get to know folks. I've had a couple of my own personal experiences sitting in previous years that have been impactful, and I can see how important it is for folks to have the Zendo space to go to when they're in need of a buddy, need of support, a safe space where they can be with whatever is coming up or whatever they're going through. And then there's also just the response that you get from just being out on playa and through the neighborhoods and meeting people, and just through conversations of folks asking what camp you're with or what you're doing here, and mentioning Zendo. Just it's often someone has been in one of the Zendo sites and needed support, or they brought someone there, or they know someone that went there. So there's a lot of respect at the burn for Zendo, from people that are just participating as burners to rangers to medical. During build, it's very common, and strike two at the end, for people to come up and bring gifts, or just like share an experience that they have with Zendo, or experience one of their friends had. And there's just a lot of love. People riding by on their bikes past the Zendo sites, just screaming, that they love us and they appreciate us. So it's a good reputation and a respect and love amongst the burner community for Zendo. Thankfully, the weather was pretty great. There was one challenging day during build and one challenging day during strike, where we had some heavy winds. So, but yeah, it didn't set us back too much. It was my first year going with a partner, and bringing her into the Zendo community as well, and kind of meeting some edges of being there with someone, as well as like integrating someone into the Zendo community, which is quite big, and there's so many dynamics within the Zendo camp as well, and social groups, and but yeah, she found her way, and of course, like Zendo's just is full of so many amazing people that are, I think, really, hold the Burning Man principles as well. Especially just inclusion, radical inclusion, and so she felt that pretty immediately and found her own friendships as well, which was nice. And I think I was just pretty going through a bit of a grieving process and sadness with the potential of Zendo Project maybe not returning next year, taking a pause, and just how different that will be for me to return to Burning Man and not be with Zendo. So lots of gratitude there as well, with the sadness or with the grieving too. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I hope to find opportunities to just continue working with Zendo and showing up outside of Burning Man for further events or whatever's next for Zendo. Just want to continue to offer my support. It just feels so important. I would say personally, just the friendships that I've developed and the community that I've developed. I was invited into Zendo. I think it was 2018 or 2019 was my first year through Jessa, and really didn't know anyone. But she knew that I think I would fit right in with the Zendo folks, and I did. And you know, some of the people in Zendo I only get to see once a year, but they're just such rich connections and supportive, and I've also just really felt in my own life, and just witnessed amongst the community how Zendo shows up at Burning Man also is how Zendo shows up in everyday life with each other, with one another, when we're together, and when someone's having a challenging time. And I think also just being really humble that sometimes we also need psychedelic care and emotional support too, and we have those resources amongst us. And so when someone is having a challenging time, just you know, not only supporting them but also just being honest that we all deal with it, no matter what our, you know, position or relationship is within psychedelic care. Like at some point, we all need that or some type of emotional support. So, yeah, I've appreciated having that community in my life that I can just lean on when needed, and yeah, not feel any shame around it as well. I have a memory coming to me of during builds, putting up the Pacific yurt, and at a certain moment at both sites, you know, the build team, we came together, and you know, there's a lot of commotion that's happening when you're building. There's music playing, and you're building this thing, and it's hot, it's dusty, and sweaty, and it's windy. But we would come together at each site and just create a space for us each to just share our own blessings or prayers and gratitude that we have for what we're doing, what we're offering, and putting that energy and putting those prayers and those thoughts and those intentions into the Zendo space as we're building it. You know, so we can just energetically already start kind of like co-creating that container for you know, folks to come in and receive care and receive support and love from Zendo. And I always appreciated those moments with Zendo. There's others like that as well, where there's this kind of a lot going on at Burning Man, and but there has been yeah, just these moments where we kind of center together and ground in, and speak to and feel to like what we're doing.
This year I was a supervisor in the Zendo, and I also supported as a Pulse coordinator and in general the Pulse initiative. Oh, I think it's invaluable. I think having a space that anybody, no matter what they're feeling, the overstimulation of the environment or the big journeys that people are having, exploring with different psychedelics or whatever interpersonal things that they're going through, to have a space that they can go to that's literally a sanctuary for people to be able to not only resource themselves but sit with other people who have training to be able to support them, to ground them in their own nervous systems and their own presence, their own loving acceptance. It's invaluable. And I think the community, any time I went somewhere on Playa and, you know, said who I was camping with or what I was doing, there was so much gratitude and so much thank you. We can't even begin to tell you how much we're grateful that you are here. You know, Zendo's a community, so there's so much that's fulfilling about being in the community and then also being of service. Some of my highlights were working interdepartmentally, like being able to work with the Rangers, which was an outpost across from us, and they had direct connection with High Rock security and law enforcement and also medical, which was adjacent to us. And I was able to support a guest who had had a really scary experience, and they had reported to Rangers, and they came to us to sit in sanctuary, and we were able to support them, and I was able to be a liaison to make sure that the person that they had an encounter with, who ended up, you know, security, law enforcement, all the Rangers, they all got kind of utilized, but the teamwork in this, and also the respect that I felt from the rangers of they could, and also medical, whenever I had to interact with them too, it felt like we were a cohesive team that all respected the different parts that we held and all the different ways that we hold the well-being of the Burning Man community. I think resources in general is the main challenge. Making sure we have everything we need in this environment that's really harsh and demanding. Making sure that we can regulate the temperature and make sure we have water, like all of the basic human needs for people to be able to regulate themselves, is kind of the biggest challenge out there when you have to bring everything in, and making sure that you're respecting the land, making sure that we're not making waste and we're not impacting the land. And I think even though we didn't have, we had enough always, but I think in the end it kind of shows you the power of human beings being with each other, even amidst bootstraps and whatever you can manage to put together, that itself had a powerful impact of holding the field, of tending to people, of making us safety, even when a dust, whiteout was happening, or intense heat or rain. We were still able to just be with each other. I mean, it's completely altered the course of my life, and I have, it's really, my family and my community, my chosen family, feels very integrally woven into Zendo, and being of service in this way, of being able to hold space for people, having non-ordinary states of consciousness and going through challenging experiences, healing experiences, being able to do that work feels so fulfilling. It's a reciprocal relationship. Every time I sit with people, or I'm helping a team that's sitting with people, or I'm helping the infrastructure get set up, or the education that they're getting, each part that I serve in, I feel this, like I'm being nourished and I'm being cared for, even in the ways that I'm offering care and being of service. So it's this kind of feedback loop of resource. Yeah, one of the things that I'm most excited about in my work with Zendo is supporting the education, the development of the education piece, and specifically the lens of trying to fold in an awareness and skill building around cultural responsibility, cultural competency, to eventually hopefully make the services that we provide, and also the people that work with us, as safe and the spaces as inclusive as possible for all different backgrounds of people. And under the lens of trauma-informed care, we take into consideration identity-based traumas, and we take into consideration social, political, or socio-cultural positionality, and making sure that we're constantly understanding what's the best way that we can care for someone, when at the bottom of it all, we actually don't know what someone's coming in with, but all we can really do is tend to their safety, and listen to them without assumption, and make sure that we're as regulated and available as possible for whatever they want to bring in, and whatever they need to ground and to, go through, not, go through to the other side of their experience. So I think the education is probably the most exciting thing that I'm supporting in the Zendo movement. So right now, there's a SIT course that is the kind of foundational 101 course for peer support, for supporting people in non-ordinary states or psychedelic crisis. And it's a big overview, and it's very, it's kind of a foundational piece that I believe there will be more specialized courses for different, whether you're crisis workers, or whether you're social workers, or whether you're actually psychedelic therapists, or whether you're just someone that wants to be able to have those tools to be able to sit with a friend that is going through a hard time. It's kind of all across the board. And yeah, right now there's a month-long module course once every week, like 3 hours, I think, every week, that you can take, and you get a kind of a certification that says I've taken the course. But I believe that there will be, building off of this, more specialized courses, and I have a vision of creating a workshop that is much more around building building skills for cultural attunement and peer support. And so that's something that's also hopefully on the horizon if we get the resources to do it. The Pulse Initiative, which is also a big part of my heart, is it's basically at the foundation of it is the question, how do we take care of the people who are taking care of others? And there's an epidemic in care providers, whether they're crisis workers, first responders, that people get burnt out. There's compassion fatigue. There's ripples of trauma. We're resonant beings that are impacted by each other's experiences, and we don't have culture built around care, about self-care and community care. And so within the Zendo organization, we have an experimental initiative to say, what if we shift the culture that it values us taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other, and what does it mean to create an extra web of support, an extra net to support and catch us if we're spun out, if we burn out. And it looks lots of different ways. It looks like on a practical level, making sure that people have actual peer support, like we actually give each other the things that we give to other people. But it also means tending to our relationships, making sure we're here and have the tools for rupture and repair, for community conflict tending. It also means this piece that I'm talking about with what I'm folding into the cultural responsibility is like, how are we making our space more inclusive and more accessible, more welcoming, and actually doing the work to work on the ways that we are perpetuating different systems of harm and oppression that are naturally in the world around us. How do we decolonize those so that the spaces that we exist in our community are safe and transforming, to make sure that everybody could feel welcome, because that's the dream. The dream is that everybody could feel safe and welcome to be in community and to sit in our Zendos. And so Pulse is kind of the pulse of what does our community need? What does it need to be well? I believe this is just the second or third. We'll be going into the third year. Oh, yes, this is a lifetime. I'm here.
Yeah, so this year my main role was Zendo coordinator. So there was like a team of coordinators that were kind of overseeing the entire services and operations of the Zendo project while it was running. The main highlights I experienced working with the Zendo this year, well, I think there's a couple that I can mention. The first would be just the community of being with the Zendo Project community. I've been with Zendo since 2015, so about 9 years now, and we've all been doing this work together for quite some time, and it's beautiful to get together again at these kinds of events, and we've established over the years like good relationships, and we support one another in doing the work, but also support one another after we've done the work, because things can come up. And yeah, it just creates like this really sweet bond between a lot of us. And the other highlights I'd say is kind of connected to that is like, you know, most of the time things are running really smoothly, and it's super great when that's going on. And then at certain times where, like, let's say a shift begins and a bunch of folks were unable to make it to their shift for one reason or another, then it's beautiful to see how we have systems in place to then step in and say, okay, like, we're gonna drive this ship in another way right now. So for example, like there was one shift that I was doing coordination on. One of the Zendos was missing a fair amount of people, and so because of my role and the way this model is set up, I was able to go there and be like basically acting in multiple roles at the Zendo, which was actually very manageable. Like I didn't feel like we were unable to fill the needs that happened when we lost certain volunteers to doing other stuff. So it just like being able to make the services operate under circumstances that are scene was a highlight for me. Oh, I'll say one more.
Yeah.
I mean, this goes for just about every event that I work now. Is I love the opportunity to work with people who are new,
Mm-hmm.
because then we can do kind of hands-on supervision and mentorship. So like there was a situation where the Zendo was full, every sitter was paired up one-on-one with a guest, and the supervisor was unsure, like, what do we do in this situation? And so what I eventually, like, what he did, he came to me, and we walked into the Zendo together, and we kind of looked around, and we problem solved together situations that I've already been in before. So, the solutions were like, okay, well, even though everyone's a 1-to-1 ratio right now, we do have some open beds, and some of these guests are simply just resting now. They got their like eyes closed and they're just kind of in an experience, or they're maybe taking a nap after a big experience. So the sitter who's with that one guest can now give presence to someone else while maintaining connection to the person if they were to wake up or need something. So like we were able to problem solve together, and I was able to teach the supervisor, some of the strategies that we have to do when we have to adapt to situations where we're really busy. There's many situations that can arise at Burning Man that would create some kind of need for the Zendo care. So, like what we're offering at the Zendo is a connection to someone who is grounded, a connection to someone who is open, compassionate, and able to listen and give someone the opportunity to express themselves without judgment. And I use the word connect because connection is a really big part of what we're offering. At Burning Man, it's this huge event with all sorts of things going on and lots of people and parties and art and stimulation and adventures and social dynamics, and people are navigating all of these things at Burning Man as they would in their normal lives. What's interesting is like Burning Man, it's not like separate of the rest of our reality. It's not a different human experience. It's just the human experience in a different place. And the human experience contains, feelings of joy, but also feelings of grief and feelings of connection and feelings of loneliness and disconnection. One of the more ironic and fascinating things about what I notice in society as a whole is that someone can be living in the most populated cities on earth and still feel the most immense level of loneliness one can feel. So Burning Man isn't that different in that regard. So at Burning Man, someone might think to themselves they need the Zendo for reasons such as, I'm feeling disconnected from the rest of the community out here, or I'm not quite feeling the level of joy I want to feel, and so that's like I'm getting hard on myself about that, inner judgment. So they could come to the Zendo to talk to someone about that and feel a connection to someone who would really sit there and be like, yeah, it's like totally a thing that happens out here and in life. You're not wrong for feeling those things. And sometimes all we really need is someone to just affirm that and like mirror to us a level of acceptance for our present circumstances. And so on that level, there's the loneliness factor. It could also be like we are experiencing a level of sadness and grief, and maybe we don't have friends or community around us that we can share that with, and we need somewhere that is really just set up to hold that experience. Sometimes we need to do that alone, and you can go out to Playa or to the temple and really be in that. And sometimes you really want somebody there who has the peer support skills and training to really be with you in that. So it's another thing we hold there. On the more extreme side of things, because right now I've just mentioned like your typical human emotional experiences that can come up at the burn, and obviously that's an extensive list, but On the more extreme side of things, we also are available for a very specialized kind of care, like a transpersonal psychedelic care. I mean, at the core of, I think, Zendo's formation, it was psychedelic harm reduction. It is psychedelic harm reduction. So we acknowledge that people are going to be taking psychedelics. You know, whether the event says to do that or not is not, that's not relevant actually to the fact that it's happening. And we acknowledge that taking psychedelics is not always just like full of the beauty that it can be full of, or the joy that it can be full of. It's kind of, as I was saying before, like it's really just an amplifier of what it means to be human. And so someone could take a psychedelic and find themselves in heightened levels of distress, such as, like, you know, even deeper states of confusion, or deeper states of loneliness, or deep states of fear, or paranoia, or even things that we may not have a logical grasp on, but is happening to a point at which they need some kind of care team to support them through it. A lot of times, what the research has shown is that that the psychedelic is bringing something up from the unconscious that, if supported appropriately, can lead to transformation and healing at very deep levels of the mind. That it's one of the reasons why psychedelic research and psychedelic therapy has gained so much momentum in recent years, because the possibility that psychedelics can lead to healing experiences is there. And if someone's out there at Burning Man or a music festival taking a psychedelic, they might be able to go through whatever they're going through on the dance floor, and it's so good, and they're like, oh yeah, like I remember like how beautiful life can be, or whatever it is that is like the realization in the moment. Or it might be really hard to hold on their own, whether they're dealing with past traumas and other aspects of the human experience and the psyche that people don't need to be alone in it. And even to more extreme degrees of, like, when I said transpersonal earlier, I mean like really intense or challenging experiences that are related to identity and related to states of consciousness that are not of our usual state, and carrying qualities or themes of spiritual or religious symbols and realities. So things that could really be jarring for someone who may not expect or be prepared for that, or have community that is aware of that. So at the Zendo, like, some of the more intensive and, I would say, transformational experiences come when we are there available for people having those experiences. Well, we've been trying out new systems for data tracking. We've been trying out new ways of keeping track of, like, what's coming into our door, and what does that look like, and how do we, like, organize all this information. And so my own learning curve has been getting used to, like, new systems, new technologies, things like that. Because I'm more used to, like, oh yeah, I've got a notebook and I write all the things down that I need to write down. And I'm a bit old-fashioned when it comes to technology, so yeah, like new systems is a bit challenging for me, but I'm adapting. I'm learning. I'm trying to think if there's another major challenge was, like, there were a number of times that we just had, like, a lot of no-shows on our volunteer schedule, and I was like, oh, okay, we kind of need to figure this out. So, what's interesting is I felt actually very resourced overall. I felt resourced in terms of our structures, our build team, our logistics people. We we had great leadership overall, and I think there were definitely times that through just the nature of being at Burning Man, we were all kind of like, at some point, someone at each day would be like a little more crispy, or like they just need to rest a little more, and we have to always keep track of our well-being, especially in extreme environments, so that we can show up for the services. So that in itself can be a challenge. Like making sure that I'm getting enough rest and sleep, or that I'm getting enough dance time. Even like if I'm not having a good time off of shift, then I'll show up to shift feeling a little lower. So that might be how I'd answer that. Oh yeah, definitely. There's so much to say on that. So I initially started volunteering for Zendo, like I said, back in 2015. And I initially did that because I myself was navigating my own transpersonal challenges related to psychedelic experiences. And I figured, well, this is a group that makes it a business. They're like, we're gonna go out there and say we're here for those weird transpersonal things, and so when I first showed up to volunteer, and I started learning, what the principles were, and then I started showing up to hold space for people and support people in those experiences. And I mean, just in that way alone, I felt like I had entered into a community that could understand what I had experienced, or at least I could talk about what I experienced in a way where it was understood and supported in some way. And just having that alone, to feel like I'm not crazy, or that I have others around me that I can say this around and feel like everyone's like, yes, that thing, yes. It was hugely transformative for my own healing journey and my own journey of understanding deeper who I am. And the next layer to how my participation in Zendo has impacted me is like, I made it my life's mission to continue the work of Zendo, or continue the work of psychedelic harm reduction. So after my initial Zendo experiences, I started to create my own services at events. I started to work. I got training and worked as a crisis counselor for a period of time, because crisis is kind of like where my heart is mostly at, whether it's psychedelic crisis or otherwise. I eventually co-founded this psychedelic peer support line Fireside Project, and like led all the trainings there at the initial launch. And so like my involvement with Zendo has not just been personally healing for myself, but it was also a launch pad for all of the spreading of this service that I feel is so necessary and important. And like over the years, as I said before, like I've built such good bonds and relationships and connections with the people who are, I would say, like the core Zendo people who show up to all the events and who've been doing this for some time now. And it's actually been really cool to see like a new generation sort of start to form. There's definitely like kind of generational things happening. Like I have my teachers and mentors, and now I'm becoming teacher and mentor to others. It's been really sweet. Yeah, I love the Zendo project. I love the Zendo project community. They're so dear to my heart. I feel very connected, and been through a lot with them, and I'm excited to see how Zendo evolves over the next few years. This upcoming year, even there's a lot of transitions. So, yeah, excited to see what happens, and I know that the mission is still clear. Yeah, so a given shift, we might have like, I don't know, maybe like 30 people on. It's like, I think, once again, I didn't actually count, but you've got, a whole team of people at 2 different locations. So, rough estimate is like 15 and 15, which includes all these roles. There's the greeter, the logistics person, the log keeper, the medical triage person, and then 8 to 10 sitters or 10 to 12 sitters from there. So, oh, and not to mention the supervisor and the lead. So, yeah, we're looking at between 15 and 20 people per Zendo site. And so, yeah, given shift, there's a lot of people, and we try to account for potential no-shows for that reason. Of course, sometimes we have no control over it, and there's a higher volume of no-shows than we anticipate, but that's just a part of the game. Yeah, and then in terms of guests, average guests, that's also a hard one because there are times where the Zendo is just nonstop, like guests just flowing in and out constantly, which is an interesting thing to see. Like, oh, we're so packed, how are we going to fit anybody else in? And then one person leaves, another one comes in. It's like, oh, well, I guess that was timed perfectly. But then there's other shifts that are really quiet and people are just hanging out and chatting and getting to know each other, which is another great part of the community. Like, even if you're on shift not supporting anybody and you're just getting to know your other volunteers, everyone who's there is usually very loving and heart-centered and has an awareness of these psychedelic worlds that it's just you meet a lot of interesting folks. So guest volume is definitely variable.